Good morning, ladies and gentlemen across the state of California. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board's Finance and Audit Committee meeting. We wish you are all well and safe and are not being impacted by the fires devastating our state right now. We will begin this morning's meeting first with an explanation to you on the phone, those who are listening as well as those who have registered to speak, from Justin on how this all works. So please, Justin, take over.
Good morning. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting.
Sorry, Mo. I'm sorry. I thought it was Justin. I apologize. Go ahead.
No worries, sir. Today we are hosting this meeting via Zoom. In a moment, we will take public comment. Instructions for public comment by Zoom. If you are logged into this meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature, typically located at the bottom of your screen, so that I can call on you to provide your comment. Public comment by phone instructions. If you are dialing in by phone, pressing *9 will raise your hand and put you into our queue. Speakers will be called in that order that their hand is raised. Once you've been in the queue and your name is called, in the web meeting, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. On the phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, you'll hear a message that you are being unmuted. Once unmuted, it will be your turn to speak. Please slowly and clearly say and spell your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you represent. After your introduction, each speaker is allotted 2 minutes to provide comments. Our court reporter is on the line to record these comments. If they need you to spell or repeat something, they may interject. You will hear a timer beeping once you go over 2 minutes. At the end of your comment, we will disable your microphone. However, you are welcome to stay on the line to continue watching or listening to the meeting. If you do not wish to provide comment and simply want to watch the meeting, you can do so by logging on to hsr.ca.gov and looking for the link to our live stream.
Thank you, Mo. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce my colleagues on this committee, Nancy Miller and Ernie Camacho. I'm Tom Richards. All three of us are board members on the High-Speed Rail Authority Board. With that, we will, before we start our agenda, we will turn to public comments, and we'll turn this back over to you. Is this Mo, or is Justin you're gonna do it? Great.
Currently, sir, we don't have any attendees raising their hand, but we'll give them a minute or so.
Okay. And we'll allow another 4 minutes for anybody who still wants to register. After the first 5 minutes of the meeting, any registration will be closed. Since there's nobody online with us now, we'll go ahead and move into our agenda. The first item this morning is to consider the approval of the August 13th committee agenda. If there are no additions, deletions, can we have a motion for approval, please?
I move approval.
Second.
Okay, Director Camacho and Director Miller on the motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. Thank you. As has been kind of the custom, I'm not going to take any time this morning from the meeting itself for any comments, but rather we'll move right into the agenda. So we begin on item number 3, which is the executive summary from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Annis.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. On your screen, you'll see the financial reports executive summary. I did want to, as we start here, note an accomplishment from our accounting branch. Our year-end close was due August 20th, and that's a budgetary legal ledger submission to the State Controller's Office. That deadline was met by our team. The teams are led by Salishni Singh and also Lisa Ortega, one of our managers in accounting, coordinated the year-end close process. So that's a very intense 50 days. I know Lisa certainly was one that worked a lot of overtime to get that done. And I'll note there's a long list on the controller's website of departments that did miss that deadline. So it's not a given that that can be done. But again, good planning, good effort by our accounting team, and wanted to note that to the board. Thank you. As I go through the report, I'll note a few changes as we go. Some of the changes are based on board direction from last month's meeting, and we also have some changes we're phasing in with the new fiscal year, which I'll note as we go. We start here on the top of the page with the accounts payable, aging, and disputes report. And we note that we've continued the good record of not incurring a late payment penalty under the State Prompt Payment Act rules for 42 months. We do note there was one aged invoice for the July reporting period of about $2,000 that was delayed, going back and forth with the controller's office and some issues as we crossed fiscal years. But that did not incur a late payment penalty under the state process. We report here as well total disputes at 14.8 million. That's a decrease of 665,000 from the prior month. The majority of that, about 11.6 million, is a single disputed invoice we're working on with the Westerville Ecological Services for some mitigation. So once that is resolved, we should go down to a level we've seen over the last couple years. Since the board's been tracking this, we're down significantly from the high experienced of 27 million several years ago. So again, still have a reduced level of disputes due to this increased effort in this area. I'll go next to the cash management report on the bottom of this same page. We start with Proposition 1A bond, and this again is the cash balance. We ended the month of July with about 200 million of Prop 1A cash. We do have a upcoming fall bond sale where we expect to sell about $80 million. And we also have a commercial paper authority, and that commercial paper is kind of a prelude to a bond sale, but we can do it quicker. Every month we can submit a commercial paper request, and we have about 340 million of commercial paper authority for the fiscal year. Most of those bond proceeds that we have authority remaining that I mentioned in the bond sale and commercial paper are for the bookend projects and administration. Most of our Central Valley capital funding is already been used as far as our appropriation authority for Prop 1A.
Brian, if I may, it's a pretty naive question, but I have not asked it before and haven't heard an answer. On the commercial paper, is there an obligation to repay that by the authority?
Yeah, that's it works similar to a general obligation bond. It's
Okay.
sort of short-term borrowing, and then my understanding is that the treasurer would then wrap that into a future bond issuance, but it gives us short-term cash flexibility. We try not to, build up an excess bond balance, to keep interest costs lower. We try to do a more on-time issuance of bonds when we need it. And the commercial paper gives us a little risk reduction because we can build in a certain amount of commercial paper that we can access month to month as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Next, cap and trade. Here you'll see if we go back to the prior page, Justin. Cap and trade ending cash balance, $2,237,000,000. That is the auctions actually through February. As the board knows, we did receive 6 million from the May auction, which was greatly reduced amount due to COVID. Department of Finance has verified that amount, and they also indicate a $4 million positive adjustment. So when the controller credits that for cash, which we should expect to show up next month, it'll be a total of $10 million added for the May period. Again, $6 million from the auction and $4 million from a adjustment the Department of Finance is making. As far as the August auction, I did report to the board via email that the August auction was significantly improved from May, but still below our recent average prior to COVID. The state sold $474 million of worth of credits, auction allowances. Typically in August, there is what we call an Assembly Bill 398 or AB 398 offset that was part of the extension of cap and trade. So we get 25% of these cap and trade proceeds to the high-speed rail program, but there's an offset of about $20 million due to this AB 398 adjustment. So we're forecasting our proceeds from the August auction will be $99 million. We will get more verified numbers next month, and then that'll show up as well in a subsequent report. But again, we do expect to add about $110 million of the two more recent auctions to this cash balance that you see here. I'll also mention next auctions in November. Typically, November auctions are a bit stronger than the other three quarterly auctions because the price goes up every calendar year for the what they call the floor price. So the auction rules have the floor price or the minimum price of allowances going up 5% plus consumer price index come the February auction. So for that reason, November auctions tend to be again, a little better than average. So we'll continue monitoring, of course, the different possible market impacts from COVID, and we'll ultimately have to see what the November auction comes in at. But again, given the fairly strong August, if conditions stay on track, November should be similar or a bit better. But again, we'll continue to monitor that.
Brian, is the 398 adjustment based on a percentage of the total proceeds, or is it always $20 million? And what's it used for?
Sure. So this Assembly Bill from 2017 was the bill that extended the auction program from 2020 to 2030. And it was a two-thirds bipartisan agreement in the legislature. And part of that agreement was that a rural fire fee that had been in place since the last recession was eliminated, and there was a backfill with cap and trade funding. And so the cap and trade funding backfills what that rural fire fee would have otherwise brought in. And I understand it's in the $60 to $70 million range. And so about a quarter of that would reduce our high-speed rail funding. And the second part of that package was a manufacturer sales tax credit that was also put in place. And that's, I understand, about $80 million a year. So our share is about $20 million of that. So last year, with that adjustment I mentioned that Department of Finance made in May, our annual proceeds were reduced by about $33 million because of these AB 398 adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And lastly, just to note, the last account that we report here is our Rail Property Management Fund. This is a revenue that comes from a small number of authority-owned properties that are leased to commercial or residential tenants. This is something that we often do at the request of the tenant to give them a little more time to move if that parcel's not on the critical path. Sometimes we can extend their residency a bit longer and give them, again, more time to relocate.
Hey, Brian.
Yes.
Brian Kelly. I just want to pause. Nancy, it looked like you were trying to get in there. Did you have a question or?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I was muted. Just to confirm, Brian, on cap and trade, there's been some press about COVID and the impacts and, some concern. But as I understand the cap and trade allowances, if they're not sold at a certain auction, they just roll into the next. Is that true? So it's not like use it or lose it kind of a thing.
That's correct. Yeah, there is a mechanism whereby the unused credits they don't all come up all at once. There's a mechanism where I apologize, I forget the percentage, but once we have an auction where 100% of the credits fully sell, and we didn't fully sell all the offered credits in August. I think we sold something like 80% of the offered credits, but if in November 100% of the credits sell, some of the unsold allowances can come back then with the February auction. And likely if the 2016-17 period had a similar circumstance where all the offered unsold credits from before sold within about 2 years over the mechanism.
Right.
Yeah, we
Thanks. And that would also be true, obviously, for the May auction that was so low, right?
Correct. Yeah, we would, best guess is sometime in 2021. Most unsold May credits would be offered for sale.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
And Brian, one other thing that just came to mind with your discussion about the Real Property Management Fund. And Brian Kelly may want to step in, but what do we have a plan at this point, both in two ways? I'm sure that we've identified excess property, or we're identifying it if it hasn't all been done. But is there currently a plan what we're going to do with excess property, and when? And secondly, when we start doing that, will the proceeds from the excess property sales will those funds go into this Real Property Management Fund? Or do we know any of that yet?
Yeah, I'll have Brian answer the second part of that in terms of which the recipient. On the first part, we have tasked our planning and sustainability director working closely with our new right-of-way manager on developing a broad master plan for all parcels. And that includes the identification of things we will need, not just for the strict alignment of the tracks, but other parcels will be necessary for things perhaps like energy storage issues we may have down the road, station development issues, other parts of parcels that we will continue to need at the authority. But we will also be identifying those parcels that we can go through a lack of a better term, a dispossession process on, and that will involve that should involve some sale back or sale to other entities, and the ability for those revenues to move into the appropriate account for us. So, Brian, I look to you for where those revenues would flow. But we are, Tom, to answer your question, we have developed a master plan, if you will, on the parcels. We could talk more with the board or the FNA about that in a subsequent hearing. But the idea is to identify exactly what we need, those we don't need, and managing them appropriately.
Yeah,
Thank you, Brian. Go ahead.
The second question is, those proceeds from the sale of excess properties will go into this Real Property Management Fund.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Tom, if I could just add one other thing.
Sure, Brian.
Just with respect to the dialogue that Nancy just had with Brian, part of the broader review we are doing in preparation for the next business plan is a rather thorough review of our revenue scenario, and that involves both Brian's office and our financial advising team looking at the construct of the cap and trade revenues, putting some various scenarios together on what that looks like, applying some risks to that, and it'll be part of what we come forward with as the picture of where we are in long-term revenues. So there'll be more to come on this as we complete all of the risk work, including the risk work on the revenue side. But Brian's team is developing those scenarios now. I just want to.
Okay. I think, as you pointed out, Brian, it might be a good future agenda item for finance and audit, and perhaps when we take a look at it, maybe onto the board. But I'm hesitant to ask you to put that into the near-term agenda so as not to take away any of the time and effort on the work that's ongoing with regards to the business plan that's got to go out on December the 15th. But I think probably early next year might be really appropriate.
I'm happy to work with you on that schedule. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I believe we can go on to the next slide, Justin. So this is our administrative budget for the fiscal year. Of course, the first reporting month of the fiscal year with July. Our state operations or administrative budget here is $73.6 million. You can see year over year it's up quite a bit, and that's due to our approved budget proposal from last year to which we called form to function, to transition consultants in some areas to state staff. And when fully implemented, we will eliminate 103 consultant positions and add 85 new state positions. And so we start out with the fiscal year with that challenge of, again, a high vacancy rate. We brought it down last year over 12 months when new state positions were added, and we start again with a high vacancy rate. But on the budget, I did also want to mention, and this is a follow-up from last month's meeting, that we are receiving a budget reduction due to the salary cuts and some of the efficiencies that are mandated to address the recession and some of the budget reductions that are needed. We did receive from the Department of Finance a number for that. We're going to see this budget reduced by $3.4 million due to these savings from, again, salaries and wages and efficiencies. So it'll fall from 73.6 to 70.2 million. So when that Department of Finance executive order is fully implemented, we'll report that new number to the board. With that, again, we, as I mentioned, start with, a high vacancy rate. It's 37.1%, with 132 vacancies out of 356 positions. We do have total filled positions of 224 state staff positions filled. With that, too, with the vacancy rate, we will tend to see underspending most months of the year until those positions are filled, because we are budgeted for being fully staffed. But transition will take most of the fiscal year to bring those new people on board. I will going to have a little more of an update on filled positions, but that comes at the end. So if I could defer that until the end of the presentation, I have a summary of some more recent information on the last page, and we can move on to the next slide, Justin. So this is our capital outlay budget report. As you can see here, we have a total fiscal year budget across all areas of capital outlay of $2.9 billion. That includes the Central Valley, the bookend projects, and the environmental work. As is noted here on the slide, we break it down first by the total. All categories is $113 million spent for the month of July. And we can break it down into two other main categories. On the top half, we look at the design build specifically. Those three design build contracts in the Central Valley totaled $74.6 million for the month. And when we include the other work on the construction packages in the Central Valley, it's $86.5 million total. And again, that top half of the page breaks it down by each CP. And on the bottom half of the page, we track in a few other categories. We show our project development, for example, the environmental work, $5.7 million for the month, and the bookend projects was $14.5 million for the month of July. And again, on a later slide, I give a bit of a quick summary of how August is looking currently.
But the note that you've got on that page, wasn't that in response? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
That was Director Camacho's request, include in this summary the, I guess, percent completion of each design build contract based on spending to contract value. So as you can see here, they're all around 60% of the total contract expended to date.
Thank you.
I have a question, and maybe this is more for Joe, so just let me know. But it looks like in the construction categories, we're estimating to spend quite a bit this year. That the monthly, and I don't know if that monthly is just for the month of July or August.
These are July numbers.
Yeah, okay, particularly on right-of-way acquisition. I mean, and I'm assuming, I just want to make sure we have confidence in those numbers. And maybe that's a question for Joe, that we'll be able to spend that.
Yeah. I think that Joe probably addressed that in his presentation, but if not, let's let Brian think about it and we'll come back to him.
Yeah, I think it actually is more a question for Joe. Sorry,
I'll be able to answer it.
okay.
Joe,
Thanks.
do you want to jump on that real quick since you're here, and then you don't need to hit it again?
Yeah, you can see when you get to the right-of-way slides in tab 10, you'll see that we're hitting the deliverable numbers right now. There's a little bit of optimism in the sense that there is a cluster, as you know, when we acquire parcels, it's typically by a owner. There is a couple owners, i.e. like Semi-Tropic, that if we can just close these last remaining few details, we'll take like 15, 16 parcels at once. So you're able to make some windfalls with regards to closing some of these parcels.
Okay, thank you.
You're feeling pretty confident, Joe, it sounds like. Or
Not real confident. I'm confident in Jennifer and the team that so far we've been able to sustain what we need to keep the RBSs flowing.
okay, thank you.
Okay. I believe we can move to the next slide, Justin. So we start at the top here with the total project expenditures. In all categories, we're showing about 7.5 billion to date. This total project expenditure summary does tie to the detail that's tab 8 of our agenda. It's total project expenditures with forecast. We did drop the with forecast from the title in the summary because we hadn't been including a forecast in this table, but on that full detail on tab 8, the expected expenditure for each category in the current fiscal year. I did want to mention as well, on that detail sheet behind tab 8, we did make some changes to how we categorize the state operations expenditures, and that was due to our work with Department of Finance. And back at the February F&A meeting, I mentioned that in the proposed governor's budget, we were adding additional detail on our category of administration or state operations expenditures to tie to some of our Prop 1A requirements. So what's now in that detail is we break up our state staff spending into 3 categories: administration, project delivery support, and construction support. And those tie to some Prop 1A categories that we need to track for Prop 1A purposes. So we did a fairly rigorous review and reconciliation last year with Department of Finance just to make sure all of our Prop 1A expenditures going back to 2009 were categorized appropriately for final expenditures. And there's some adjustments here again in this detail to reflect that. But overall, I think this is a positive change that, again, Prop 1A had some expenditures to track, and now we're doing that transparently in the governor's budget. and we wanted the FNA to see that same categorization of this detail. So we updated that report to match as well.
Okay.
Bottom half of the page here is the state match to ARA. Again, as you'll see along the total line of the bottom table, the FRA had previously approved $477 million of match. They discontinued that going into 2019, stopped reviewing, although we've continued to submit. Through the month of July, we've submitted over 1.1 billion of additional match, bringing the total at FRA to 1.6 billion, leaving a remaining match of just under 900 million. But we, on a subsequent page, I have a further update through August, and we did have some significant additional submittals in August. So I have a bit of an update on the final slide when we get there.
But this doesn't improve what you've got in your bullet at the bottom with what you've got in process, which then takes it up to about 87%, right?
Right. Yeah. That some of that in process through at the end of July has been submitted.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
If we go on to the next slide, this is our contracts and expenditure report. Again, reporting 202 active contracts as of July with 8.1 billion in total contract value. A small business utilization rate held steady month over month at 21.3%.
Hey, Brian and Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Brian.
Apologies. Can we go back to that slide? I just wanted to ask Brian one question, make sure that all the members of the FNA understood our timeline on this match issue. So on the match of the ARA funds that the state's required to match the federal dollars, not including what's pending, we're at 64.5%. If you include the things that are pending before the authority now, we jump up, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, to 87% of the match. And Brian, I just wanted to confirm for the members, the timeline for the full match is December 2022, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the federal deadline is December 2022.
So again, I just want to point that out because it's one thing to say, here's the numbers, here's the percentage, but also where we are on that timeline. I think, what this is indicative of is we're well ahead of the required schedule on this, and that's really what I want to make sure you all are seeing here. So forgive the intrusion, but I just wanted to clarify that point.
And just to finish off slide 6, just mention here, again, there are 560 small businesses working on the project. Of those, 180 are disabled business enterprise and disabled veteran business enterprises. We move on to the next slide. This slide reports on our use of contingency relative to the contingency established by the board in May of 2019. Overall, that adopted budget in total 15.6 billion included a contingency across all categories of about 3.6 billion. Through July, about 1.7 billion of that contingency has been authorized for expenditure through change orders and other mechanisms, and about 1.86 is the remaining balance of the contingency that has not to date been allocated. We also report in this area the use of contingency for a change order exceeding $25 million, and you'll see toward the middle right on the chart, there's two use of contingency change orders that exceed 25 million. There's a $90 million PG&E utility relocation item in CP23, and there's also a $61 million item for subsistence and constrained right-of-way for CP23. That second one has to do with the subsidence where due to drought and water pumping, different parts of the valley floor have subsided, and there's some additional dirt requirements to continue to meet the high-speed rail standards for elevation changes, and also some other mostly dirt-related costs to bring in more dirt for that, and some constrained right-of-way purposes. So those are the two reportable items for the month.
And may I just for clarification, and assuming we also have some board members listening, Brian Kelly, the process on the ones that are beyond 25, so the 90 and the 61, were those, what's the process for approving the larger change orders like those?
Typically for change orders above that threshold, they go through an internal process here that involves our BOC committee, our committee that deals with the larger change order issues, comes to the executive committee for review and approval, and then there's usually a notification either through from me to you or through this process here where we report it to the F&A committee and then more broadly to the board.
Okay. Okay, thank you. But it obviously it is all being funded through the board approved contingency at this point.
That's correct.
Correct. Next page, please. So this final page here is a bit of an experiment or a pilot, if you will. The board's talked over past meetings about getting more recent information, and so this information was not available when your board package was delivered last week, nor or posted to the website for the public. But we did a bit of a what we call a flash report internally. To give us our best initial information on some of these August numbers. This is very, again, just finished yesterday. Some of the invoices come in on the 5th of the month. When we produce our fully detailed reports, we will have project managers review those. We'll have accounting staff review and enter them into accounting systems. We'll have our reporting staff pull data from accounting systems into our reporting format, so that that process does take about 5 weeks typically. And really, we're finding we can't keep quality and constrain that any more than we have already in our board reporting cycle. But again, the pilot here is to give you some preliminary numbers and see if that's helpful. So the top graph here is our preliminary numbers for our construction packing expenditures in the month of August. And you'll see here that these are a total for all the DBs look like $90 million for the month of August. And then for all the construction package activities, including things like right-of-way, it looks like a total of 115 million. Both categories, of course, are up from August. These numbers will probably change somewhat. Again, these have not been fully vetted, but this is what the initial reporting is of invoices coming in. We'll vet those, and then when we report next month in October, the reporting month will be August, and you'll see, again, somewhat different numbers, but probably this level of magnitude for the construction expenditures.
Yeah, Brian, one question. In these packages, or even in the slide before when we talked about contingencies, do we the delay impacts are funded generally through contingency? Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. And after the May 2019 budget was adopted, including the contingencies, each of the CPs did have a time impact payment made.
How do we budget for that if, in fact, they haven't brought it to us yet? You know, as I understand it, at least as I read in the newspaper, I think it was CP1 had potentially a $400 million delay claim coming at us. Is that going to be funded out of the contingency?
Well, I believe that was a sum of various change orders, that number you cite. And again, those change orders will be reviewed, and often the full amount requested isn't the final payment. Often there's adjustments to that.
Ernie, can I jump in on this? I just want to add that when we adopted in May of 2019 the $15.6 billion baseline budget, there was an identification in there of what we called known and unknown cost pressures, if you will, or items to be addressed. And what we know about this project is because we are in this constant game of playing catch up on the right of way, that we are in a time impact scenario. And so we have to accommodate that some way when we build the budget. And we did that in phase one. The other issue that comes into play here, which you're going to hear about a little bit today in the broader board meeting, are some of the known expenditures that are part of the project but were not fully developed. And so, for example, today the board will hear about the intrusion protection barrier. Yeah. And that is an example of a regulation that was in place, but certainly not prior to the award of the contracts. That regulation had to go from a regulation to a specific design requirement and construction requirement that we are now fully realizing. And so we are going to talk to the board about that today. But my point is that in developing the initial budget, it did take into account these kinds of unknowns and knowns that required us to set some revenues aside for these kinds of things that we know were coming. And then we, as we get through the work and we progress the work and those become more structured and understood, then we come forward with the appropriate change order to execute them. And that's been the, so.
Wait, I'm sorry.
One more comment I just want to make about the quote newspaper. Each of those past issues raised in that paper were change orders that we had presented to the board, the F&A committee. We had made public months ago, and they're available on our website for the public to access. So I just want to be clear that these are things that we budgeted for through a contingency, but we also have been quite transparent on when we address these, how we address them, and then making them available to the public for broader review. And so I just want to make that point.
I just think somewhat historically over the years with regards to your comments just before the last one, Brian, we basically acknowledged over the years changes in scope, which are often classified inside of change orders. And the changes in scope were really unknown scope at the time. One was clearly the intrusion barriers. You're saying something today that I must say I must not have ever understood this. So the requirement for the intrusion barriers is actually a regulation, is that it?
Well, it was a requirement that came through the Federal Railroad Administration and the freight railroads initially.
Well, yeah.
On how to establish appropriate safety for trains traveling at the speeds that we are proposing, which I want to say is unprecedented in the United States. And so the intrusion protection barrier came out of an initial discussion and agreement through the FRA Rail Safety Group, the freight folks and high-speed rail folks back initially, I think, in 2014. We'll go through this a little bit in detail in the broader board meeting.
Okay, that's good. I think it's important also, but I mean the whole issue over time with regards to unknown scope was somewhat also related to the fact that we were moving forward with construction in order to meet an ARA deadline, of September of 2017. And we, I say we, I mean the board had to acknowledge that we don't have the entire scope clarified at the time. And so it's always been reported, at least in the media, as being change orders. And what I think a fairer way of stating some reasonable amount of it has just been unknown scope. And you can be criticized for the unknown scope issues, certainly. The alternative of that was obviously either deliver by September of 17 or be at jeopardy for the R grant because you didn't comply with the spend provision of it. So it's just been a challenge, and it would always be, I think, helpful when we do have a change order to at least discuss, is this a change order in the traditional sense of a change order in construction, or does it have something or more to do with unknown scope that we had when we started construction, and be criticized for that portion of it and justify why it is we were in a position we had to move forward with construction at the time. That Ernie and I have talked on occasion about that you just wouldn't typically do in a construction project without some sort of extenuating circumstances that are a requirement of a project being completed.
Tom, we're going to talk today at the broader board meeting about the intrusion protection barrier, but I want to be clear with you all that that's not the only example. I mean, the other
Sure.
that are coming before us, and that we can do additional presentations if the board so desires, include things like the approval of what was called the Northern Extension to go a little bit further toward Madera than the original contract.
Right.
That, we didn't settle the alignment on that until 2019. And so, that comes with scope that's got to be accounted for, moving from an elevated structure to an embankment structure in budget 2-3 has issues that we have to deal with in terms of additional right-of-way, make sure we're accounting for those, making sure we understand how that will relate to things like an intrusion protection barrier requirement. So there are, and the most recent one I think that you will be hearing more about relatively soon is even when the High-Speed Rail Authority did the relocation of Highway 99, which was a very impressive relocation job. The initial scope for that included the extension of the intrusion protection barrier and the completion of the guideway on the train track element for 2.5 miles that was then taken out of that project. So we have to come back and visit that 2.5 mile issue that was taken out of that project. So these are scope issues that have not been addressed that we are addressing and must address. And so that's just part of building this project. And if there's better ways to describe that we can do with you all on the board, these are things that we have to tend to, that we're just in some cases business or program management decisions made some time ago that we certainly have to account for and execute today. And so that's what many of these are.
Brian, one question. When we talk about the unknown scope, are we talking about unforeseen conditions in some cases? Intrusion barrier to me should be a design problem, and it should fall on the side of the contractor, because they, from a regulatory standpoint, they should be designing this to include that. So that should be, it would seem to me to be their issue, not ours. The difference between unknown scope is, I guess, another word for uncertain, in some cases, unforeseen conditions, which we have to bear the responsibility for maybe. But the intrusion barrier, and I know we've had a lot of discussion about it, should be considered to be a design issue as opposed to a construction issue.
Ernie, let me just say that you're going to get a good opportunity to discuss that in greater detail in the broader board meeting when we go through that presentation. I think, what I would say about that is you had a regulation in place, but not the implementation of the full requirement. In other words, how this is going to work, what we will bring to this, and exactly what scope is it applied to and not. It's the first in the nation requirement. We've had to put this in place. We did, in the $15.6 billion budget, acknowledge that this was some of the unknown contingency we built in. And now we're bringing that to bear to get the requirement completed. You will hear later in the broader board meeting where we are on CP4 on this and CP1, which is a little bit more advanced. And you'll hear from our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Hedges, where we get into some of the commercial dispute that I think you are alluding to with who's responsible for what on this, and some of that's in 2.3. And so these are things we are working through in real time. And again, you'll go through some of that in the broader board meeting today. But your point is well understood, and you'll hear how we're dealing with that certainly in 2.3 today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thanks for the question, Ernie.
Brian, or Tom, can I just ask one question?
Sure. Go ahead, Nancy.
I'm asking a question about the slide, Brian, that you just had up, because it went through a construction budget and then it has a line of total for each one, but it's not really clear the difference between those two. I mean, I'm assuming that's administration had it on or something. I don't know, but maybe you could just explain those numbers.
Sure. Yeah. And so the DB, of course, is just payment to the DB contractor. When we total, we add things like right-of-way, the payment to third parties, if that's other construction costs for the month, project management costs.
Okay.
I think, Nancy, stated another way, the DB is strictly construction costs.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Thanks. Other elements of the project.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Brian?
Well, just note the bottom two briefly. We do show 3 net positions filled in August, and then on state match to ARA, we did submit a very large, a couple packages, mostly the construction, the DB work. We submitted as ARA match, so you see a big jump there of over 300 million. Again, we submitted some cases 4 to 5 months of each design builder all at once to catch up a bit there, and now we're with that would be about 77% of the match achieved.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Brian Annis from the members of the committee? All right, thanks. Hearing none. Brian, thank you. A great report. Joe, if you can take over now with your Central Valley status report. And you're on mute. You're on mute, Joe. There you go.
I apologize, my fault. I'll try to do this within 30 minutes, give you adequate time to close out, if you don't mind. This is all in tab 10, please. What we will do in this brief is that the first 7 pages of this brief basically are your summary briefs. And we'll just kind of, from there, we'll go into the brief. I'll reference and go deeper into the brief for the specific slides. So if you'll bear with me a little bit. First bullet references basically page 11 of the slide presentation. As you can see, we're a little bit above our expectation of expenditures with regards to achievement of ARA. As I've explained before, this is not a linear approach. This has a curve to it. We expect that the gradients of expenditure to pick up in the future. If you look at the approximately the $2.8 billion of current expenditures, that'll put you about halfway to achieve ARA. Okay, so that's where we're at. We have about 2.8 plus to expense between now and the end of December 22. A lot of work to do. That basically summarizes very much the difficulty of achieving ARA right there. Going through pages 10 through 12, This is specifically dealing with the expenditures of the construction packages. You can see that we had a very positive month in July. We have achieved about an expenditure of about 73 million to the projection 59 million. So we're quite above that. Now, also what you're seeing too is a steady growth of those invoices. When you compare back to July of last year, where you have about 150% growth. Now, linearly, if you look at a lease square foot of the increase, we are jumping the monthly cumulative invoices by about approximately $5 million per month. As in shown here, we expect next month to start that ramp up as we achieve that $90 million plus mark next month. So it's a good news with regards to progress. You will also see in the next bullet in construction labor, again, that is reflected there. Probably the best near-term key performance index to look at. You can see that if you look at the lease square foot here, again, we are regularly bouncing 50 workers plus a month. Our average 50 keeps growing. So you see a good steady state of positive growth and achievement. Now, I give credit where credit is due, and that's to the teams down in the Central Valley, to include the design build contractors. So good steady growth. We're maintaining that good steady growth. All positive there. You can see again that, like the rest of society right now, we're struggling with COVID. We average about 16 or so workers quarantined at any one time, a little bit of flux. We've had about 4 incidences of COVID on the job. So again, our jobs reflect society. Hats off though to the teams and our safety. They've instituted very rigorous protocols that have allowed us to keep us manageable and to maintain that steady growth even through this COVID. So hats off to the team. CP construction underway, which is basically on page 14. You'll see that we got about 78 miles of the guideway under construction of the 119. There's no increase there. Now, how we've been able to keep construction moving on the guideway is by literally hopscotching over utility conflicts, protect in place, move over them, create basically holes in alignment that we will come back in and fill in as we advance and come back. That is the best way that I can keep advancing and keep that construction moving forward. We picked up one structure last month. I expect the structures this number to start ramping up and increasing as we work diligently on the utility relocations, which I will speak on, that we are moving utility relocations. We have great progress. One of the things that was holding us was the initial stages of that utility relocation, which is that land conveyance. Right now, you can see that we're with the type 1, tier 1 land conveyance, which is the land conveyance that we need to do prior. It's a pre-construction activity. Basically, we're about halfway there right now. We have almost no backlog of those. As soon as we get property, we're able then to achieve the land conveyance. So all our obstacles with regards to PG&E have been removed and eliminated. I congratulate and thank PG&E for their cooperation and their spirit of partnership. Very good partner. Moving down to pages 15 through 18. Okay, these basically slides show you that we had delivered 18 parcels to all 3 CPs during this month. Okay, the origins of these parcels were through acquisition, through some of the stuff that we had in backlog, able to bring them forth. But we have met all of our critical requirements currently with regards to row, right? And have no critical path impact currently with regards to road. You can see that we're ramping up in December, but if you look at the road charts on page 16, you can see that we have a big lift in December of 20. Right now, the strategy is to work in front of us. Now, what you see in this bar chart, now, I want to point out this in page 16. These numbers, this 119 in December, the 38 in January, these are linked to the construction schedules, right? Per parcel. So when we say there's 119 parcels in December, right, I know the 119 parcels. So that's when we report that we have achieved 18 of the 119, right? It's saying that we have taken that future backlog and we have moved them down. You can also see that we have parcels all the way delivered out into August of 21, right? So we are accounting for the exact parcel. So if we miss a parcel, let's say next month in August, there's 32 due. Let's say we only achieve, it's not what has happened, but let's say we only achieve 30. I will be able to tell you the 2 parcels that we have missed, okay? And be able to tell you the significant impact of missing those 2 parcels. Tell you which CP it's at and what it's holding and what it's delaying. So I want to congratulate the schedulers and right away for that ability to be able to do that, okay? Now, another big thing that you see is we were able to acquire 7 parcels. I expect this future acquisition of these parcels to increase. Like I said, I keep saying this and I keep praying every month. We're on the verge of some landowners that have large numbers of parcels. If we can settle these, then we will then take 15, 16 parcels at once, which would be a windfall for us. Now, you're also able to see here in my 4th bullet down that we were able to remove 38 parcels from the total. This is the result of integrating right-of-way and design together very closely, working with the design groups as in trying to eliminate some of these, what I call the point parcels, point something of a parcel associated predominantly with these utility really locations, as in to compress our right-of-way. Because it just isn't the matter of acquiring right-of-way, it's a matter of also being able, if we can, reducing the total number of right-of-way that we need to achieve. That is one way to achieve the goal. Move the target down if we can, and move the production up to that target. So both those things are happening simultaneously. I call out Jennifer Loudon and her crew for that ability. I also call out Russell Burgess for his ability to integrate and keep track of all this through a database that we are now currently using that keeps status per parcel. Very, very integral, the weekly progress is very, very good. Know exactly where every parcel is. So making great progress there. Also too, you can see we have the ability to deliver railroad parcels as needed. That currently isn't an issue. So I expect that 112 to grow, to bring those parcels on as we need them. We're not bringing them on in the future. We just want to bring them on just in time. So as I spoke to you, basically switching to page 3, kind of running through the summary, right? We have moved 28 land rights conveyances in July. Now this gives us a total of almost 350, which is about, approximately about 50%, over 50% of the land conveyances. We have very little backlog in the land conveyances, so as soon as we're able to get property, we're able then to convey those rights instantaneously. Also, Dennis Kim and his group is working in front of us. They're preparing these land conveyances, getting them on the shelf. As soon as we're able to acquire them, It's simply a matter of dusting them off, putting in some of the final acquisition data into them, and sending them to PG&E. So a very good process. We've honed this now to a very productive, almost to an art. Third-party agreements, you can see that we have finalized basically 39 agreements. We finalized one more this month. That was the Lower Tule River Irrigation District. So again, is making good progress. Now, moving to pages 52 and 53, which talks about the record of rods here. Today, as you know, with the 2-day board meeting, we keep advancing the rods, keep moving the cycles forward. You can see that we have this underneath very rigorous schedules, project management. We also have it underneath risk management, that we are attacking and achieving our milestones. And currently, right now, I view that this is all very achievable within the ARA deadline. Should be no issues here. Okay. Now, if you want, Tom, I can go specifically and talk to each of the CPs now on page 4 of the summary. If you would like to talk to specifically to each of the CPs, it is up to you, sir. Tom, you're on mute.
Let me ask my colleagues, would you like to have Joe go through each of the CPs, or would you like to have him address any other questions that you might have? No need to go through the individuals. Is that what I'm thinking you're saying, Ernie?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Nancy?
I agree.
Okay.
I'm always available to if you have any specific questions as I review the report.
We know where to find you, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say thank you, Joe. It's very complete, and you did a good job. Appreciate it.
My hat's off to, again, is great appreciation to Christine DeYoung. She is the driver and the force behind this report. I think it's been honed very well. Basically tells the truth. It's very transparent and allows all to see exactly where we're at.
Right. Anything else then from Nancy or from Ernie? All right. Is Brian Anna still on?
Yes.
Brian, could you email me and the other committee members, if they would like, the slide that you presented on your 20,000 foot estimate of what happened in August?
I will do that, and we'll also post it on our website for the public to see.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right. With that concludes our agenda. And if there is no, well, let me ask this, Mo, if you're still with us, I assume that nobody who had registered to make their comments has indicated that they're in the audience. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. I've been monitoring the whole time, and none of the attendees has raised their hand.
All right, thank you. All right, well, thanks to Justin and Scott for the behind-the-scenes work as always, and Mo for your keeping us centered here. With that, the Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be adjourned, and we will hope to see or listen to everybody at 11 o'clock this morning on our first session of the September board meeting for the High Speed Rail Authority. Thank you and good morning, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.